Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if last month it appeared we hosted a Book of the Month club, this week it seems that we are hosting an anger management class. Nothing is going to come out of this hearing with regard to impeachment of the President. I know it, the media knows it, and the Speaker knows it. The Democratic leadership has said time and again they have no intention of bringing any impeachment resolution for the President or the Vice President to the House floor. Why is that? It's because they know it won't pass. That's because there is no evidence to support impeachment. To quote a Democratic member of this committee during the Clinton impeachment, Congress, quote, has no authority to forcibly remove the President simply because they dislike him or disapprove of his actions, end quote. And another Democratic member of this Judiciary Committee said yesterday he did not think the President had committed any crime. After holding 32 hearings and listening to over 120 witnesses, the members of the Judiciary Committee have found no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by the President or the Vice President. Meanwhile, congressional approval ratings have sunk to a record low. Only 9% of those polled believe that Congress is doing a good job. That makes President Bush's approval rating of 32% look pretty good. The American people have a low opinion of Congress because Congress reeks of partisanship. This partisan hearing contributes to that view. Instead of partisan bickering and bitterness, we should consider bipartisan legislation to reduce the price of gas, reduce crime, and secure the borders. Speaker Pelosi came into office promising to govern in a, quote, respectful, bipartisan way. Yet there is nothing bipartisan about this hearing she suggested or the Speaker's recent comments about the President himself. Americans are tired of bitter partisanship and want solutions that unite our country. They want lower gas prices. They want to keep their children safe from violent crime and sexual predators. And they want to live, work, and raise their families in a United States free from terrorist attacks. The relentless efforts of some individuals to malign the outgoing administration only demeans and harms the institution of Congress. This hearing will not cause us to impeach the President. It will only serve to impeach Congress's own credibility. Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, I want to read, with your permission, an excerpt from the House rules. And let me say at the outset that I have confidence that our own members, as well as our witnesses, will abide by these rules, as you always have yourself, and in fact you've always encouraged witnesses to do so. But let me quote from the rules in regard to references to the President. This is a quote. The rules do not permit the use of language that is personally offensive toward the President. Personal criticism, innuendo, ridicule, or terms of opprobrium are not in order, end quote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'm now pleased to recognize a distinguished member of the Judiciary Committee, the Honorable Robert Wexler of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this for purposes of an opening statement?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud your tenacity and courage for calling for this hearing. For the past few months, I have vigorously argued that this committee should immediately begin impeachment hearings. The allegations made against the Bush White House document serious abuses that, if proven, would certainly constitute high crimes. The White House is charged with deliberately lying to Congress and the American people and manipulating intelligence regarding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, ordering the illegal use of torture, firing U.S. attorneys for political purposes, denying the legitimate constitutional powers of congressional oversight by blatantly ignoring subpoenas, among countless other crimes. Never before in the history of this nation has an administration so successfully diminished the constitutional powers of the legislative branch. It is unacceptable, and it must not stand. This is not how our founders so carefully and delicately designed our democracy. In a deliberate effort to reduce the power of this Congress and obstruct our ability to provide oversight over the executive branch, President Bush has ordered Karl Rove, Harriet Miers, Josh Bolten, and other administration officials to simply ignore Congress by refusing to testify. This failure of administration witnesses to even appear is unprecedented in the history of our nation. The Bush White House has distorted the concept of executive privilege beyond recognition in order to hide White House wrongdoings. Faced with this litany of wrongful actions, I am convinced that the most appropriate response to this unprecedented behavior is to hold hearings for impeachment. The power of impeachment, the power of impeachment, which our founding fathers provided to the House of Representatives, was designed precisely for this type of wrongdoing. I fully recognize the significance of holding impeachment hearings, and I have not come to this position lightly, not one bit. But when an administration takes actions that amount to high crimes, we, the representatives of the people, are left with no option other than to seek impeachment and removal from office. Our government was founded by a delicate balance of powers, whereby one branch carefully checks the other branches to prevent a dangerous consolidation of power. The actions of this White House have eviscerated this careful balance. This is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is an American issue. Without these checks and balances, a president can run roughshod over any law with impunity. Congress must end this disturbing pattern of behavior. And in these circumstances, unfortunately, the only option left is impeachment hearings. We have been down this road before. Yes, we have. In 1973, articles of impeachment were introduced against President Nixon after he inappropriately tried to use executive privilege to bury evidence of his wrongdoings. I think it would be helpful to delve more deeply into what happened during the Nixon administration, particularly as it relates to the obstruction of the oversight powers of this Congress. Mr. Chairman, I thank you so much for having this hearing and giving the American people an opportunity to hear about how we can begin to take our government and our country back. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've been reminded by a member on the committee that there are to be no reactions. As much as we want to applaud and cheer the statements that we totally approve of, let's restrain ourselves, please. I'm very pleased now to recognize the chairman of the crime subcommittee, Bobby Scott, the distinguished gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, if government is to work with three branches of government, we have to understand the executive power and its constitutional limitations. So there are a number of issues that we have to address, such as the politicization of the Department of Justice, including hiring policy, and the use of Department of Justice resources and powers in violation of the Constitution. We have to find out whether or not crimes were committed, which resulted in us getting into Iraq, and who has authorized what virtually everyone in the world outside of this administration considers torture. We have to figure out how we can do an investigation if the Department of Justice does not enforce subpoenas when witnesses refuse to cooperate with our investigations. And so this hearing on executive power and its constitutional limitations will not only help us define those limitations, but also recommend ways to enforce those limitations. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Thank you. I am now pleased to recognize Steve King, the distinguished gentleman from Iowa, who is the ranking member on Immigration Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would notice, Mr. Chairman, in your opening remarks that you used the phrase the power to remove. And as I read that in my Constitution, that's actually impeachment. We are here having impeachment hearings before the Judiciary Committee. It's an astonishing thing to me to think that I was sitting back there in 1998, in December of 1998, watching what went on here. It was one of the inspirations to me The reason I'm sitting here bigger than anything else is because I sat out there and I was influenced significantly by both sides of this in ways I won't go into. But this is impeachment hearings. And however, whether it's called the power to remove, these are impeachment hearings before the United States Congress. I never imagined I would ever be sitting on this side when something like this happened. And as I watched the Bush administration in every day of these 7.5 years, I didn't see anything along the way that would have indicated to me by an objective judgment that we'd be sitting here with these impeachment hearings today. But here's what I'll tell you is going on. We have had this parade of 45 separate public hearings, as the chairman said in his opening statement. 45 of them, among them the Chief of Staff for the Vice President of the United States, David Addington.